Welcome to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're joined by my guest, Luke. Luke is here to talk about his experiences with sleep paralysis when he was a teenager, and one instance where he had an encounter with now he believes to be the Hat Man. Before we dive on into our story with Luke, if you've ever had an experience or a story you'd like to share, please get a hold of me. You can reach me at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. You can find Tinfoil Tales on Facebook. You can shoot a message on there. If you'd like to help the show, please share it, like it, subscribe to our podcast. Anything you can do that could help us out definitely is appreciated. We're going to dive on into our story with Luke, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'm joined today by my guest, Luke. Now, Luke has had some experiences, and he was kind enough to come on here and share it with me. So, Luke, thanks for coming out and talking with me today.
No worries. Nice to meet you, Brandon.
Nice to meet you, too. So, when did your experiences begin? If you want to kind of go back towards the beginning, give us a little background on it.
Yeah, sure. So it was around my sort of late teens, sort of in mid-30s now. So quite some years ago. I started experiencing sleep paralysis. So I'd occasionally just wake up or become conscious, should I say, kind of in a paralyzed state in the middle of the night. And that would last typically 10, 15 minutes. And I'd usually just be kind of fighting to get out of this paralyzed state. Because, if you've not experienced it, it's quite an alarming thing to sort of happen, to just wake up and not being able to move your body, but be totally aware of it. And I just, typically sort of tense my body and fight my way out of it, which would take around 10, 15 minutes. And eventually I'd kind of wake up and after calming down or whatever, I'd go back to sleep. And I told some people about this, and obviously I'd found out that sleep paralysis is kind of a semi-common thing. It's a known phenomenon in the medical world. So I kind of accepted it as that. Really, it's just sleep paralysis is something that some people get and something that I get. So I just kind of accepted those experiences for what they were. I'd say I had that phenomenon like sort of 2 or 3 times in my teenage years. And then when I was around 18 years old, I had one experience that obviously I've never quite forgot. It was very, very intense at the time. It was my last experience of sleep paralysis. It's not happened again since. But this time it transpired a little differently. So I woke up or became conscious in this paralyzed state. But this time I was not in my own bed. I was actually sat up in what I believed to be at the time. I believed that I was in a taxi. Definitely, a vehicle of some kind, and I could see the outside world, and I could see that I was on my own street, traveling in the direction of my home, and in the front of this vehicle, I could see someone driving it. And I tried to look at this figure, or this person, but all I could see was kind of a silhouette. Basically, they were kind of like just a silhouette of a person, all in black, and I could see that they were wearing almost like a trilby hat. And I tried to look into their eyes because there was some kind of like rear view mirror, which is what led me to believe it was a car of some kind. And I tried to look straight into their eyes, and all I could see was black. But obviously, seeing, being in this situation and seeing that that fits, somebody driving you somewhere, and you're not knowing, who or why. Obviously, my reaction was to try and scream at them, basically scream, "Who are you? Where are we going?" But that's obviously the point when I realized I was totally paralyzed within my eyes. I mean, I could open my eyes, and that was it. And I tried to scream, and obviously experiencing this real frustration of wanting to scream, but physically being unable to. As I, tried to scream at this person, I kind of blacked out again, and then became sort of conscious in my own bed in that paralyzed state again, that I experienced many times before, but this time it was a lot scarier because of what I just experienced prior to you know realizing I was in my own bed. So again, I tried to fight my way out of the paralysis. It took me about 10-15 minutes, and I eventually managed to sit up out of it. But this time I was just a lot more traumatized than any other time. And I remember just obviously being in that sort of traumatized state and trying to sort of breathe my way out of it, convince myself, oh, it was a bad dream. It was a bad dream. It was sleep paralysis. Go back to sleep. And that's what I did. And at the time, obviously, I just convinced myself, oh, it was a bad dream and it was sleep paralysis. But it was something I never forgot. And I remember telling one of my friends at the time, oh, I had this what I think was a dream, but it felt real. And obviously he, thought it was ludicrous and I just had a bad dream. But he always remembered it as well because he could hear the sort of terror in my voice when I was telling him about it. And I kind of got on with my life really. I did actually. Well, recently I've realized that after that point, I did have a lot of mental health issues afterwards. I would say I was fine until that point, and I did go through many years of mental health issues that I've now been treated for. I never made the connection to that event and my mental health issues until recently. So now, yeah, I'm in my sort of mid-30s. That was in my teens. Of complete sound mind and sort of overall my issues and everything. And my current partner, she's very interested in all things paranormal, something that I never explored myself much until recently. And I happened to tell her about this experience. We were just talking about kind of vivid dreams, really, and I told her about the experience, and she was really taken by it. She had a fascination by the fact that I'd seen this dark figure. She's very into all things paranormal and ghostly and things like that, and had some experiences herself with sort of ghosts and spirits and everything. So she was keen to explore this with me, and we started because the figure I saw, I described him as like a black figure in a hat. We just started googling black hat man, not expecting to find anything about it. And then obviously it's just opened a rabbit hole for us. And there's so much stuff out there about black hat men or shadow people. And there's an entire documentary on it. And we were just watching, other people's experiences. So many people have experienced seeing this figure. Lots of people have theories about it, it being some sort of demon, a spirit. And also some people believe it's like a disguised alien of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've just kind of been exploring it. Just out of interest, really, that all people finding it strange that all people see this figure. And who is it and what is it and what its connection to sleep paralysis is, because the more I look into sleep paralysis, lots of people who have sleep paralysis, they report seeing a figure, either just seeing this being or feeling like this being is enforcing the paralysis on them somehow. And then more recently, we with our fascination with all things paranormal, we started watching things about alien abductions, because one thing that's not common about my experience when I look into things about sleep paralysis and shadow people and black hat men, what's not common is the whole abduction scenario, because obviously I feel like I was being taken back home by this figure, and that's quite unusual, it seems, until I started watching stuff about alien abduction, and I found that lots of people who claim they've been abducted by aliens, they either remember being taken or being taken home. It's very rare that they remember any more of that. So it got me thinking about my experience, and I think that's when I joined the alien abduction group on Facebook, which I spoke to yourself on. And I was asking the question about shadow people and aliens, and are they connected? And that's when I come across this theory that potentially, the shadow people or whatever they could be, sort of aliens in disguise, or they've affected our vision somehow, so we can't see them, or something like that.
There
Uh,
is quite a bit involving shadow people that kind of goes in correlation with alien abductions. I've actually got an episode prior that was out about shadow people, and I've talked with others, and they always mention the same thing about shadow people. So it's what's really kind of got my curiosity going is how are so many different people seeing the same exact thing?
yeah, no, it's really strange. I mean, there's lots of sort of theories, sort of by doctors and that. I've been looking at the more rational, shall we say, approach to this. If you read about sort of doctors' theories on sleep paralysis, because you're in a deep sleep state, you're in a sort of slightly hallucinogenic state, and maybe when you have paralysis, you hallucinate and come up with a reason why you're feeling like this, and that's where the theory that you see a figure sort of inflicting this on you, and then it's all hallucination. But what really gets to me is that why does everyone see the same thing? And it's a very specific image, especially the figure wearing a hat. If it was just kind of a random hallucination that our body does in that state, surely everyone would be very different. But like you say, when you explore it, it's kind of it's a very common hallucination. I'd say too common for it to not be coincidental.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to believe in coincidences, especially when there's too many similarities of kind of what you just said. If someone was going to hallucinate and they've never heard of Hat Man, why would they be hallucinating of something of Hat Man? Like, of all the things they could, why would they all have the same exact appearance, descriptions, scenario? Like, it doesn't add up to me.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I don't, everyone's mind is so different, and when you think of like people's dreams, they're all very unique to them, but this particular experience seems very uniform when you speak to people who've experienced it, which yeah, there's definitely something more to it than simply a hallucination.
Now, there's different groups of how they describe like shadow people. Some people see just like silhouettes, almost like shadow movements and stuff. And others I've talked to, do you remember the movie The Predator where the thing's cloaked? I've gotten a lot of people that see shapes and figures like humanoid looking figures, but they swear that they're cloaked like the Predator was. And that's also really common. And people call those shadow people too. But I don't necessarily consider them shadows because I think when I think of shadow, I think more of a darkness to them, not something that looks like cloaking. But there's a lot of similarities between both encounters, both witness, like the witnesses I've talked to, and some I've gotten on episodes, and others I've just spoken with people about. All their stories are very, very similar. So that's what really gets my curiosity going is why are there so many similarities to these instances? Like people are seeing a hat man, some people are seeing like cloaked figures, and they're all similar of how they see it. And sleep paralysis is also very common when it comes to these situations.
Yeah, that's interesting about the cloaking. I mean, the figure I saw, it was literally a silhouette. There was no features, but I have heard people saying that they could actually see some features sort of seeping through, like seeing red eyes or things like that. Um, so potentially, yeah, it is some sort of cloaking that they do, and sometimes they don't do it. I don't know either. Some people's can break through the cloaking somehow with their vision, or they just don't do it very well, or they want people to see a glimpse of them. It's I guess we're only guessing at this stage, but um, yeah, it's very, very interesting, the similarities, like you say. But it does, even the most rational people make you wonder um, why why these hallucinations are so similar. And yeah, there's definitely got to be something going on, something that we don't understand. Um, and that's what this experience that I had, and all the sort of talking to people I've done and watching documentaries is definitely made me veer on the side that there's something unexplained here, and I don't think anyone quite knows the full picture as to what it is. But yeah, I don't think it's simply hallucination. And the whole thing with sleep paralysis, I've done a lot of reading on that from a medical point of view, and they have a theory as to why it happens, but they don't actually know the cause. Which I think is very alarming for the people who've experienced it, because if they don't know a cause, then and everyone claims that some being does this to them, then yeah, there's every chance that there's something or someone inflicting those on us, which is kind of scary, really. Um,
I've never really told anyone this prior on like an episode or anything, but years ago, and it's probably been about 20 years ago now, I remember waking up and I felt like someone was strangling me. And above me, I could see it. I thought it was someone wearing a cowboy hat. Like I was laying in bed and I couldn't move and I felt like I was being strangled. And it looked like they're wearing a cowboy hat. It was just like a dark figure. And to me, the hat looked like the old Western cowboy hat style. But I couldn't move and I couldn't move. And then finally, I was able to move. And then, like, my throat actually kind of hurt from it. It was strange. And I kind of just chalked it up as I was just dreaming. And maybe I hurt my own throat from trying to move or whatever. Like, I never really looked too much into it years ago. But after talking with other people and everything and coming across this hat man and everything else, I was like, I wonder if this, like, that was the only time I experienced anything like that. So I don't really consider it sleep paralysis, but not being able to move and feel like something was strangling me, and then waking up and still feeling like something had a hold of my throat. I don't know if it goes in line with the same situations as the Hat Man and the sleep paralysis theories, but I was like, that's the only thing I can really correlate with experiencing something similar.
yeah, definitely, that definitely fits the pattern when you look into sleep paralysis and the Hat Man. That is quite common. I mean, I never felt that being held down by my chest feeling. But yeah, when you read up on it, that's something that people commonly report. They report that they're paralyzed and they see this Hat Man-like figure, and sometimes this figure is literally holding them down. So yeah, that does sound like you've experienced a similar thing, and I mean, did it feel kind of real to you and not like a dream?
It felt real when I was seeing it, but then after like I got able to move and I looked around, like everything, like my eyes were open, and then I was able to sit up, and then it wasn't there, and to me, I felt like I was still dreaming, but I was
Yeah.
awake. So I always just chalked it up as I was having a nightmare, but my eyes were open. So I try and remain skeptical a lot. So for me, I always try and rationalize more provable theories, I guess. But I've never been able to explain that other than, well, I was just dreaming. So
Yeah, and that sounds yeah, similar to my experiences, really. That it feels real at the time. It doesn't feel like any dream that you've had before. It feels real, but then when you come out of it, I think immediately you tell yourself, oh, it was a dream, because as soon as you're kind of awake and you're in bed and you're safe and there's nothing there, you immediately think, oh, it was a bad dream.
yeah,
But it's very strange that they always fit that pattern. It's always a dark figure. They're always wearing a hat. They always stop you from moving.
yeah. Like I saw no face or anything like that. I just saw like a silhouette, and it looked like someone wearing a cowboy hat silhouette above my bed. Like I looked up and I could see them looking down at me, and I just couldn't move, and I felt like they had a hold of my neck. So
Yeah, it's scary, and that definitely fits the pattern. And yeah, the more I speak to more people about it, especially yourself, it follows too much of a uniform pattern for us all as humans to experience the exact same kind of dream or hallucination
yeah,
that follows that pattern. And the theory that I've read from doctors is it's interesting. You say you felt like it was a dream, but you were awake and you could open your eyes, because that's the theories that doctors have. They say that you're in REM sleep, which is the deep, the deep kind of sleep where your body doesn't move, which explains the paralysis, and it's also the state in which you dream. So their theory is that you actually become conscious in a REM sleep where you're dreaming and your body's not moving, which is why it's like the dreams feel real and your body can't move. But yeah, the bit that doesn't make sense to me is that why everyone then has the same dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in that state. That's the bit that doesn't make sense to me and makes me think there's something more to it.
Why is
Um,
everyone experiencing something that's shaped the same looking thing like the Hat Man?
yeah, yeah,
That's like I've never heard of a Hat Man. 20 something years. I still lived at my parents' house, and I haven't lived there in 20 years. So I was still a teenager at the time. So it had to have been at least, like I said, 20, 22 years ago, something like that, that I had to experience it. And I remember I said something to them about it or whatever. And they all just kind of laughed it off a little bit. And then I just wrote it off as I was just dreaming. This was before I really started diving into a lot of things. And I never even really heard of Hat Man up until like the last year or two. So,
yeah. That's very similar to me. This experience had happened in my teens, and I kind of had no interest in sort of the paranormal and never sort of heard anything like that. But that was my experience. It's only in the last few years that I've found out that actually lots of people see this figure and see it, so it's not like it's in your consciousness already to create a dream like that. It's people who've never heard of the Hat Man experience the Hat Man. So it's too freaky a coincidence. The interesting thing you said there about the pain in your throat, that's that's something that I never kind of um remember at the time, remembered feeling at the time of my experiences. But um obviously when I was exploring the whole alien abduction theory, I started watching people who claim to have those alien abduction experiences, and uh, most people who've had those experiences, they tend not to remember the full thing, and the only time that they really find out more of their story is when they have regressive hypnosis. Um, So when I saw people going through regressive hypnosis, all of a sudden they don't just remember being taken or being taken away. They come out with these crazy stories about being taken onto ships and being operated on and things like that, which is the classic sort of alien abduction story that you hear. Um, and when I watched people being going through that regressive hypnosis, it seems really really real. So that the terror that you hear in people's voices when they relive the experience under hypnosis is very, very real. And if it's acted, well, it does deserve some sort of award, especially if you look at Travis Walton or Betty and Barney Hill. And after watching those abductees relive their story, I looked around to see if I could find any hypnotists who do regressive hypnosis. And I managed to find this lady who did past life regression, which is another rabbit hole that I've never kind of gone down. But yeah, that's something that seems to be quite popular where I am in the north of England. Past life regression, where obviously people regress back to a life prior to the one they're living now. I'm not sure what I think to that. I've not really explored it, but yeah, trying to find someone who did regressive hypnosis for experiences like mine, it's kind of non-existent where I live. So I contacted someone who did the past life regression, and I said, look, I had a traumatic experience in this lifetime that I don't remember all of. Would you be able to do some regression on me to see if there's some more memory there? And it was quite a strange request for her. She never sort of had such a request, but yeah, I saw it there last week, and I did the regressive hypnosis, and she made me revisit that experience in the car with the Hat Man like 3 times. So the first 2 times she took me back to that experience, and I basically recounted what I told you before, what I can consciously remember. and it kind of it wasn't going anywhere. And then when she did it the third time, she kind of took me back to what happened before I woke in the vehicle, and she said, take yourself back to before. So what were you doing? So I said, oh, I was asleep. I was in bed, and she said, how did you feel? And the house I was in at the time, my mother's house, was very, very cold. I think it must have been winter time. And I think when she took me back to the physical feeling of being cold in that room, all of a sudden I was transported back to that place physically. And the interesting thing here is then she then asked me to kind of ask me how I felt next and what happened next. And I basically started recounting the physical memories of that night. And when I say recounting it, it was like reliving it physically. I could feel all the physical sensations of being back there. Yeah, that side of the hypnosis is quite powerful. Literally reliving the physical memory. And she asked me how I was feeling, and then I said, "Oh, so I'm cold and I'm in bed." And I said, "Now it all feels different." I said, "Now I feel very, very light and weightless, and I'm floating, and I can see light." And I just felt a lot warmer and lighter, and like I was floating upwards, but I couldn't see anything, just light. And then all of a sudden it changed, and I started to feel cold, and everything went dark. And then I had this sensation in my legs, like I don't know if you've ever been under a general anesthetic. I have once before, and when they give you an anesthetic, you feel this kind of cold liquid go from where you're injected and kind of seep around your body. You feel this sort of coldness consuming you. And I felt this from my legs, so I felt that cold anesthetic liquid feeling going from my legs all the way up to my head, basically. And as that was happening, I was feeling this strange kind of tingling, sort of numbness. And then I started to feel a sort of like a burning in my throat, a sort of burning soreness in my throat, which again kind of correlates to some sort of surgery. Obviously, anesthetic going around your body, and then something going down your throat. And I think at this point, the hypnotist was quite freaked out by what I was recounting, and sort of quickly took me out of the hypnosis, because it was, even though it was like an experience of anesthetic, it was quite terrifying for me reliving it, because I'd not recounted that before, and I don't know, there was just this feeling of trauma about it, which my hypnotist could detect, and she quickly kind of took me out of that state of hypnosis, and told me it wasn't real in a sort of reassuring way. I don't think she quite believed it all, but she could feel the trauma that I was recounting. So
I've always been a little hesitant with hypnosis, just because I think it could be a double-edged sword sometimes. I think people might be better off not fully recounting things, and if they have an idea already of what they want to look for, and like the hypnosis person or whatever is asking specific questions, I've always wondered if it doesn't manifest memories that aren't exactly memories, but it's because you've thought of them, you've manifested this image in your head now of what you think happened, when that might not necessarily be true. So if she didn't really have any correlation to go off of your past experiences, I don't think that is something that she put in there. So I think what you were just saying is probably actually something you may have experienced.
Well, yeah, it definitely felt that way. I mean, I wasn't sure what to think of hypnosis prior to that. I because I'd been under sort of hypnotic states before, and I always felt like it was still very much conscious, and I was a bit skeptical that any kind of further memory could come from that. But yeah, the physical memory that came back to me was very, very real. But you know, the skeptic in me says, "Oh well, I've been watching stuff about alien abductions for weeks now. I could have created that memory from what I've seen because it does sound very similar to um, other people's experience, but I don't know that." I definitely relived something very physical and very traumatic. Um,
You mentioned Betty and Barney Hill and Travis Walton, and
yes,
if anyone's listening to this podcast, they probably know those stories, I would assume. But I've always thought the Travis Hill incident, or not Travis Walton incident, is one that stands out the most because if I'm not mistaken, all of the people that saw what happened and Travis, they've all taken polygraph tests over the years, and every single one of them have always passed the polygraph test. So, and it's not like anyone else involved in it got any notoriety out of the whole thing. Like Travis is really the only person they ever talk about. So I can't see them all scheming up this idea of an abduction and then he shows up a few days later and they all are going along with it. At some point, you think the truth would have came out if they faked it all.
yeah, I agree. I think it's the most convincing story out there because it's got 6 or 7 witnesses who saw the abduction, and they've all stuck by their story. Like you said, they've all passed the polygraph tests, and I, I can't think what incentive they'd had to do for that. They'd have for that. Otherwise, like I say, Russell Traverson has had book deals and a movie out of it, but I don't think you could have predicted that, and I think, yeah, the other guys haven't really got anything from it, and they've still stuck to their story, you know, years later. So it's very convincing.
And a lot of them, they faced ridicule about it as they were hoaxing the whole thing. And I think some of them actually had to move away because of everyone saying that they're full of crap, basically. And why would you do that? And why would you still continue to stick to the story if it wasn't true? Like, what are they getting out of it? It's like they almost ruined their lives just for the sake of ruining their life. That doesn't add up to me.
No, no, you're right. Yeah, some of them did move away because of the ridicule, and they uh, they were also suspects of his murder initially, because when he was missing, they were all suspects of a potential murder. So it's it's very very high stakes, and yeah, they've not really gained from it at all. So yeah, I'm a big believer in those stories, and it's watching those stories that sort of convinced me that there's something going on, and started to make this connection to my experience, which I'd almost kind of wiped from my memory and passed off as a dream. But there's there's too many experiences like this, and especially credible ones like those with witnesses. Um, I do think the alien abduction theory is a credible one now.
I don't know how to correlate it with Hat Man and Alien and anything other than that. Other like it's bizarre, it's paranormal one way or the other, but it's hard for me again being a skeptic or trying to remain skeptical without actual proof. It's all just everyone's theories. So I can't full on say that, yeah, these are aliens, but what else could it be? You know, that's the path that I kind of lean towards is what else would it be?
Yeah, well, I think if you believe that these stories are abduction stories that involve some sort of experimental operations, I think the alternative to that is even scarier if it's actually um, humans doing this um, to each other, or some sort of military or government scheme to abduct people and conduct experiments. That's even scarier than the alien one. Maybe that's we say aliens because that's even easier to comprehend than other humans doing this to us.
Now, there's a story, and I've talked about it before, and I can't ever think of it, but supposedly these kids came across something down by a creek or a river, and it appeared to them as a clown, but it looked strange for a clown. and it took the kids back to its place, quote unquote, and it was basically described as like a small little metallic house that the kids described it as. And they don't remember anything like bad happening or anything like that, that it was just being really nice, but it didn't really speak to them that they could remember it like speaking, but they could understand it like it was almost talking to them, I think telepathy like. And I discussed this with someone else who had alien abduction stories as well. And we kind of went off on in his opinion, if this was actually aliens trying to understand humans, they'd be projecting something not as like threatening. So they correlate like a clown to like happiness because, oh, kids go to carnivals and circuses, they see clowns, it's a happy time. So let me try and manifest my image to look like something that correlates to being like happy, not threatening. So I'm wondering if possibly this whole Hat Man thing, if it correlates with aliens, would they be manifesting themselves to appear like a typical human, like wearing a hat and everything else, because that's how they see humanity. They don't understand us. They think what they're doing would make that look normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'd not heard that the story about the kids being taken to some sort of metallic structure on this planet. Is that right?
Yeah, it was down by a river basically. I'll go back and try and find out what the actual story was, and I can send it to you offline. But
Yeah.
it's I can't think of what it was called, but no, it was. There's been some articles, and I think I've heard some stuff on maybe another podcast that talked about it as well. But it was one of those stories that came out a while back, and it kind of makes me think of. I think he was right when he said like projecting images. If you're if you're here to study humans, you wouldn't want to come and look like yourself. You would try and blend in, kind of if you're wanting to understand how our minds work and everything. So to me, that almost, of all the crazy theories that I've heard, that one seems the most plausible, that it does make sense as to what they'd be doing.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard theories like that. Yeah, obviously the whole sort of cloaking thing, maybe they would disguise themselves as something human-like so that we would interact with them. I mean, it's the Hatman one seems a bit bizarre if that's what they're trying to do, because it's a very kind of scary image, but it is a human-like image. And I think that's very interesting about the whole clown image that the kids saw, because I guess yeah, kids would warm to a clown-like figure because it's obviously that's children's entertainment, so obviously they're going to warm to that figure. I also find it very interesting that these kids were taken to a structure that could be extraterrestrial on this planet, because I've heard lots of theories about so-called aliens not necessarily being from another planet and being from this planet. There's theories about the whole inner Earth, or the lost cities, and Antarctica. Um, so I find that theory very interesting. That actually it's maybe not something from another planet. It's another race or it's species from this planet that we don't sort of consciously know about, or ancient civilizations living in a sort of parallel dimension to us, or just being hidden in plain sight.
I think the alternate reality slash dimension theory has a lot to do with it as well. But I just looked up that story. It's called the Sandown Clown, and it happened in 1973. It says at Lake Common, Sandown of Isle of Wight in the UK.
That was in the UK.
Yeah,
Okay. The Sandown Clown. I'll definitely look that one up. I find that fascinating.
yeah.
And
I knew it was something similar to that, but I couldn't think, so I just Googled it real quick and found the actual story of it. So you can definitely find it online.
yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna look that up. I'm definitely curious to find sort of more stories from the UK as well. I think it feels like there's not as many kind of publicly known phenomena sort of reported from the UK. Um, So yeah, I'm definitely interested to find out more.
I've always thought the crop circles seem to be, at least from over here in America, I always see more of the crop circle stuff happening over in the UK area. At least that's what we see over here.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I need to look more of this stuff up because yeah, it feels like a lot of the stories that you hear are very much sort of from the USA, but I'm
Maybe
sure.
maybe each country does that to make it look like it's somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, that would make sense actually. Yeah, yeah, there's probably more control over our media to make us feel that it's there's no threat to our home countries.
Well, the US government finally did full disclosure, which wasn't really of anything, but they admitted that there are UFOs that they don't know what they are, where they come from. So I guess that's a little bit of openness. It doesn't really say it says they're not of this earth. So how do they
Did
know
they?
that? I don't know, but they at least acknowledge that there's stuff out there that they don't know what it is, and it's not of this earth as far as they know.
They actually said it wasn't of this earth. That's interesting.
Pretty sure I guess I shouldn't say that without 100% positivity, but I'm pretty sure that's what it said, that these were not of this earth as to their own knowledge or something similar to that.
As to their own knowledge, yeah, yeah. I think that's a careful
But
caveat of theirs.
yeah, they're not going to 100% say, "Yep, these are aliens," but it's aliens.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had seen that. Yeah, they've. I mean, I think that I think I'd heard that they were kind of almost backed into a corner to release that footage, but yeah, they've actually gone out and admitted we don't know what this is.
Yeah, there was stuff that was from the Navy pilots, and then I think it's all come about in like 2017. But some of the videos and stuff were shot prior. Some were actually from 2004, and they claim out of majority of the cases, they released some big 100 and something page thing. I believe I've never read it because I'm not going to sit down and try and scan through these documents. But just from what I've read of like people that actually have read them, is kind of where they said that like about 99% of these were all written off as whatever. And it's just like a few here and there that they claim are unexplainable. So that doesn't mean they're not of this earth, as of could be another country's technology or something, but they wrote it off as they don't know what it is.
Yeah, and that's a massive shift, like from the government to actually admit that there's stuff in the skies that they don't know of. Um,
Yeah, because usually everything, there was Project Blue Book back through the 60s and 70s, and they've been researching UFOs regardless of what they say publicly. They've done researches and everything for years. But why the big secret about everything, I couldn't tell you.
yeah, well, I think it's you know a government of a country that's kind of meant to protect people and keep them safe. It's not something they want to admit to. But there's unidentified objects in the sky, then we don't know what they are. I suppose they, especially during times of war, they don't want to admit to that because it creates an uncertainty and a panic. It's interesting they've done it now. Maybe now that I was about to say we're not at war, but I guess there's always conflict. So
There's always a
yeah,
conflict somewhere.
yeah, yeah. So it's fascinating that they're admitting to that. Um, but I'm sure there's a lot more that they know of that they're not disclosing as of yet. So I'm fascinated to see what else they release, if anything.
Yeah, our Congress was the one that actually put this bill in motion for their own stuff, and they had meetings about it that obviously were considered confidential, like secret if they're not going to let that info come out to the public, but they release what they would release to the general public. And like I said, it doesn't come out saying there's aliens, but it does acknowledge that there is stuff that they don't know what it is.
That's crazy. Yeah. Having an interest in this stuff, I guess it's an exciting time to actually have that confirmed from the government and see actual footage of actually verified unidentified flying objects. Fascinating. I'm curious to know what kind of what information they have on contact and abductions, because obviously, like you say, um, projects like Blue Book, they have researched this stuff. So there's got to be some more sort of evidence that they are withholding from us. And I know the amount I'm hearing about sort of contact with, not necessarily aliens, but contact with something that's not human or not recognizable as human. There's far too many credible stories that are out there in public media. I think there's a lot more that the government know that they're not telling us.
I'll send you a link to one of my episodes that I think it's episode 10. And I had an interview with a doctor from Greece, and he actually has an artifact, basically an implant that was taken out of someone. They pulled it out themselves. They sent it to him, and he did some scanning of it. And the episode, he actually has, from his scientific stance of it, he has proof that correlates with the implant to another crashed sphere type thing that someone else found material wise, like on a molecular level of how they're designed. So I think you can check that episode. I think you'd find it fascinating because he's also talked about his own abduction stories. So that was the episode I was talking about with the Sandown Clown on. So I'll send you a link to that here offline.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by that. So we're saying that the implant that was removed actually was a similar material to a verified sort of UFO crash. Is that right?
Some type of a crash sphere. He doesn't know. I don't think it's been a while. I'd have to go back and re-listen to it, but he didn't have that sphere, but someone did research on it, and some of the molecular stuff, like how it's designed, is similar. Obviously, it's not 100% because whatever came out of the person has the same like genetic makeup for like a metallic metal they would use for like stents you'd put in someone's heart, like medical stents. So the body wouldn't read it as intrusive. And this came out of someone's foot, and they don't know how it would have gotten someone's foot. And they ended up pulling it out because they didn't feel it. There was no blood, nothing. And I forget how long he said it was, but they ended up sending it to him, and he did all this analysis on it. It is like his lab or whatever to come back with all these results. It's a very interesting episode.
Wow. Well, yeah, there's too much. There's too many incidents like that to ignore. That's interesting that it was the fragment was in his foot. Did
Yeah,
I hear that right? Yeah.
yeah, it was in his foot, and he said it wasn't something he would have stepped on without noticing that they stepped on it. So he said him and I'm assuming it was a he, but they pulled it out of his foot and they sent it off to him, and they don't remember how they got it in their foot or anything about it. They just noticed it kind of protruding out, I think, and they dug it out.
Wow. That's interesting about it, especially for me about it specifically being in the foot, because the strange thing about what I recounted during hypnosis was that whatever this kind of anesthetic experience I had came from my feet, which is very unusual because obviously all our sort of operations when we administer anesthetic, it's usually in the upper body, usually in the hand. But I remember that being the strangest part of it for me when I was recounting that experience, is that the anesthetic seemed to come from my feet. So I find that very, very interesting that this implant was found in someone's foot, because maybe that's how extraterrestrials sort of do medicine, is that they implant things into feet, they inject into the feet, which is very not. It doesn't align with how we do things on this earth.
Yeah, I thought the foot thing was strange too. If someone were to step on something, and I have stepped on something before. I was in a wheelchair for like 2 months when I was about 10 years old, because I stepped on a metal rod and it went right through my foot. And if you were to step on something, you would have felt it. So I don't know how something could have been stuck in someone's foot and they never would have knew anything about it. To me, that's bizarre.
Yeah, very bizarre. I've heard a lot of people who've had supposed alien encounters or abductions or operations. They always talk about things being implanted with no scarring and no blood and no pain and things like that. So
Yeah,
there's
the whole phenomena is just unexplainable.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we'll ever get a full explanation, but I think there's a lot of information out there, and the more we sort of talk about it and pressurize our authorities to disclose more, we might get some more understanding of what's going on with these experiences and what where all this comes from.
I agree.
Yeah.
Was that the last in like time that you remember having like any sort of a sleep paralysis incident, or did you have
It
anything
is.
after that?
It is, yeah, yeah, and that's the strange thing. That's something that's also very uncommon with my experience compared to other people's. But for me, obviously, I had two or three experiences of sleep paralysis where I don't remember anything more, and then that last experience where I woke in the vehicle. After that, I never had sleep paralysis again, and I never had any other strange experiences like that afterwards at all. So yeah, I find that very strange. I spoke to some people on the alien abduction sort of Facebook groups, and someone said to me, "Oh, they clearly have sort of no interest in you because most people, if they have a supposed alien abduction experience, it's a regular occurrence. For whatever reason, they seem to keep revisiting them to sort of check on them or conduct more experiments or whatever. But for me, it was it was a one-time thing. So if it was some sort of alien abduction experience, then yeah, for whatever reason that they only needed to see me that one time. Um,
I've always looked to try and determine why people would be getting abducted. Like, what is the connection between this person and that? Is it all random? Is there something, a specific type of blood that they're looking for? Like, what's the pattern? But I've never been able to come across anything that I can think of that would be like a pattern that anyone could see or notice. It just all just seems random to me.
yeah, but when I've sort of read other people's experience, I mean, there's lots of crazy theories out there. Obviously, I think some of them probably make sense and quite credible, and maybe there is some people out there with some delusion, so it's hard to differentiate. But one thing a lot of people talk about is their belief that the aliens are trying to sort of clone us or create some sort of hybrid race. So the Betty and Barney Hill story, for example, they remember having the Betty remembers having something taken out of her stomach, and Barney said they were doing something to his genitals, and the theory is from a lot of people that yeah, it's about taking our sort of reproductive um, sort of organs and creating some alien hybrid race. I'm not sure I quite understand why they would do that. I heard something about some people believe that this race is dying out and they need they need us to keep reproducing. Um, but yeah, I thought that's quite an interesting theory. Like some people claim that they've been abducted and they've been taken to meet their hybrid children, which is a pretty crazy theory. But I guess it
Yeah,
it would explain why people are revisited and why we're even being experimented on at all, if that's the case.
I see it as if they are experimenting on us, we're to them kind of like what a rat is to us. Like maybe they're using us not so much to test their stuff, but if they are cloning and making hybrids, maybe they're using those as a way to test their own techniques on the, you know what I mean? kind of like how they claim they can grow stuff on like they're using pigs to grow like human hearts or whatever that they're trying to do. They've grown an ear on like a rat, supposedly. Maybe they're doing that on these clones, like you said, because their own population's dying off and they're looking for ways to try and save their own selves by using us for experiments.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at it like that, it doesn't seem as crazy because we do that. Exactly. And I think we've done cloning experiments. I believe in this country there was a story about us cloning a sheep. I remember it was big news at the time.
Yeah, back in the
Um,
90s, they cloned a sheep.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, when you look at it from that perspective, it is actually not that crazy as to why another race from another world would do that to us, especially if they're more advanced than us. I mean, it is almost when you look at what we do to animals, it is almost like a little bit sick and kind of arrogant that we go, we can just take a species of animal and just say we're going to grow an ear on your back or we're going to clone you. It's yeah, it puts a different perspective on it entirely, and to think of someone to doing that to us is quite terrifying. But we do that to animals all the time.
Yeah, they could view us how we view rats. To them, we're not as superior. We're just a lower level life form, and they're gonna do what they want to do because when I work in construction and they do a lot of building for like roadways and everything else, they think about certain impacts to animals like migrating birds and other things like that, but no one thinks about the anthill that's down there that we're tearing out. So maybe to us too, we don't think of ants or insects as anything. Maybe to them, that's all we are.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, if there is an alien race, as people describe it, they're definitely more advanced than us, especially if they can make it to our planet from somewhere a long way away. They're definitely more advanced than us. So it doesn't seem far fetched that they see themselves as a superior race and that we're there to um, experiment on us as they please. And there's also that theory. I mean, this is all far fetched. I feel like I have to caveat that when I recount these theories. But there is that theory that there was actually an agreement in the 50s between the US government and an alien race from Zeta Reticuli that they could indeed come and do experiments on us in exchange for technology. Pretty crazy theory, but when you look at what happened between then and now, we did advance massively in a in terms of technology between like the 1950s and now. Technology has increased at a rapid rate, and we've had all these stories about alien abduction. So if that theory is true, it does correlate precisely. Really, our technology has improved, but we have had an increasing number of people claiming to be experimented on. And
I haven't looked back too far into abductions of what like old time abduction counts or anything, but I do believe that since World War II, there was a gigantic increase in people reporting abductions. So that does make sense.
yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. I think it was is it President Eisenhower? I think it was it. I think his granddaughter is the one who's claimed that a deal was made. Um, but yeah, a deal, technology in exchange for experimentation, and the caveat to that deal was that the humans must be returned safely, and that theory would go to explain that why people who you claim to be abducted and be experimented on are always returned safely. Um, if this race was coming and just experimented on us as we please, then why would they necessarily return us safely if they believe they're superior and we're just rats to them? Then why not just let us die in the experiments? But they actually return us. So yeah, I find that
You know,
very interesting.
I've read some stuff about that too, and there's just so many theories that it's hard to pick which rabbit hole you want to go down, I guess. But like I said, I try and remain skeptical for the most part, but I do believe there's just too much. I call it evidence. There's just too many stories of why people would be encountering things and seeing things and experiencing stuff. Not everyone can be crazy. I'm not saying that a vast majority of these stories aren't someone's. I think they're true to most of the people, whether they're actually what they're remembering or what other it's actually what happened to them. I think they're true. So I'm not here to discredit anyone for what they experienced, but I'm not going to say that every story that someone has told me is 100% factual because I can't do that. But I just think there's too many similarities between stories and other evidence we can see, like anyone can see that experienced it, to just sit there and think that, oh, no, these are all, it's not true. They're all lies. People are crazy. Like none of this is happening. No, there's something really going on.
Yeah, yeah. There's far too many stories from seemingly sane people to say that it's all lies. It's all it's all mental illness. Um, yeah, I agree. And like you say, not everyone's crazy, and I think there's far too many of these stories for it to all be nonsense and the ramblings of a crazy person. One thing I read that was quite interesting recently on the alien abductees group is lots of people have told these experiences to their doctor, and apparently, if you say to a doctor you think you might have been abducted by aliens, you are treated as if you've got schizophrenia. Um, which, um, which again, I think not everyone can have schizophrenia. And the interesting thing that people who've gone through this are claiming is that if they mention alien abduction to their doctor, they will get prescribed schizophrenia medication. And most of these people are saying that it doesn't stop their experiences. It makes them less anxious about it, which anxiety medication will do, but it doesn't stop strange things from happening to them at all. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard that part, but it does make sense that they would write them off as schizophrenic. And I don't know if that's something that they've been instructed to do to try and discredit people. That's another conspiracy in itself, I would think.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's lots of theories about cover-ups and trying to discredit people who do claim these sorts of things. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's something doctors have been instructed to do, because it does seem strange that you only need to mention alien abduction for them to immediately jump to a serious medical condition like schizophrenia. I also found myself when I was speaking to my hypnotherapist, who, I mean, her main sort of job is helping with mental illness through hypnotherapy. And all throughout my meetings with her, she repeatedly asked me, am I under supervision from a doctor? Am I on medication? And I kept telling her no. And the more, I mentioned the possibility of alien abduction, she would ask me again, even though I've told her a few times that I'm not under supervision from a doctor, and I haven't got any conditions at the moment. I'm not on medication. So yeah, I
I
really
think
want.
that's kind of the preconceived notion that a lot of people have these days. It's kind of been like planted into their head now. If someone talks about abductions or any type of weird stuff, whether it be aliens, whether it be like I've got interviews, people see like these Bigfoots or other cryptid monsters or something. People see these strange things that can't be explained, and everyone writes them off as crazy just because it's not normal. It doesn't line up to what we perceive as reality. So anything outside of our normal realm is considered crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's been happening for a long time. I think things that unexplainable, um we have put it down to mental illness, but there's certain things, I think society's moved on a long time, like homosexuality, for example, used to be viewed as some sort of mental disorder. but now obviously it's, it's accepted that it's not. But like I said, if you said that to a doctor maybe 100 years ago, they see it as you've got some sort of mental disorder. So it's interesting that, yeah, maybe that's the case with paranormal. It's going to be seen at the moment. It's seen as some sort of mental disorder, but maybe as time goes on, we might learn more and realize that it's not necessarily the result of mental disorder, and there is actually something there.
Yeah, I think that would I think there would be a big change to a lot of things if we were to determine that there is something like this going on, either paranormal, extraterrestrial, anything like that. There's going to be a lot of changes that would have to happen. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of this stuff is kind of kept under wraps, just because the impact that it could potentially have on everyone. It basically uproots everything that we've been taught for how many years. So I think there's a lot of that involved with it as well. Not to mention, we mentioned war earlier. I think the technological superiority between countries. I think they like to have that technology in their back pocket. They don't want to share that with everyone just because it gives them the advantage if they ever needed it.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's going to be for change takes a long time with attitudes and society and policy. So yeah, I think if we start to admit to some of these paranormal events, extraterrestrial events, a lot has to change, and maybe that's part of why things have been held back. Like people have said that, oh, the military or the government hold back what they know about extraterrestrials because society can't handle it, and maybe that's what they mean. Things like that, the attitudes and medical science, so much needs to change for us to be able to talk about these things like they are real and they are happening. A lot needs to change, aside from merely disclosure.
Now, maybe it's just me personally, but if I was to find out that there's life outside of Earth, there's other species out there, there's intergalactic communities or all whatever going on, I'd be like, oh, I still got to go to work. I still got to do my normal routine. Okay, so it doesn't really affect me. Cool, that stuff's going on, but does it really impact us all that much that it's going to make a huge difference that we know that or not? That's where I struggle with.
Yeah, I agree. I think there'll be a massive sort of fascination or some mild panic for a while, but I think people will just get on with things. I mean, there's lots of scary things going on in the world at the moment, but people still just go to work and look after the families and get on with life. Like there's actual wars going on in other countries, and when these things first become news, everyone panics about it and talks about it and is sympathetic to people that are going through, and it's a big deal. But very quickly we kind of go back to everyday life. So I think if we admitted to something extraterrestrial, I think the same thing would happen, really. I think there would be a period of panic, a period of questions, a period of intrigue. But unless it resulted in some sort of war with another planet, on a global scale, then I don't think it would take very long for people to just move on with their lives, and then it's just something that we accept.
I think that's another reason. If there were a race that came down here, they'd probably view us as stupid just because we can't even get along with our own kind. How are we supposed to get along with other species that could be potentially superior than us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And maybe that's why they are keeping a fairly low profile if they are coming here and visiting, because yeah, if they see what we do to each other. I did hear one theory that extraterrestrial sightings, or UFOs, only really started majorly after we invented nuclear weapons. And one thing I learned recently, which I wasn't aware of, that we actually tested a nuclear weapon in space. We actually launched a nuclear bomb into outer space, and apparently there was an increase in UFO sightings after that. So maybe there is a concern from them, that if we knew of their existence, we might, we might be hostile towards them. So that maybe that's why they're keeping a close eye on us and experimenting, and just observing, because we might be the threat.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've also kind of looked at it as if they're interdimensional, not so much from space, but just at a dimension that we see 3D. Maybe they're from a 4D, 5D realm, and they're just crossing over into ours. It did uptick after the nuclear weapons and all the explosions and testing. And then there's actually been a lot of UFO sightings seen over these like missile silos and stuff. And I believe there was one the 1980s in the UK where they were actually over that US nuclear site. I forget the base or whatever, but I've seen a lot of stuff about it where they actually were chasing this light in the woods and they saw this craft, and the craft had like a lot of numerical, like matrixy look to it or something, like numbers and stuff that were going like codes flashing on it. Very strange story. But the interdimensional, if we're doing that, what we're impacting here, I wonder if that has an impact, if there is different dimensions on their side. You know what I mean? So maybe they're coming here and be like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, yeah, I can believe that for sure. Yeah, there's always an increase in sightings around nuclear, military bases that have nuclear weapons or test them. And like you say, if they are interdimensional and they're actually from this planet but from another dimension, then we might be affecting their world, which could be another reason with the interest in us. And there's also there's that theory about inner Earth as well, about another species living underground. So if that's, if there's any merit to that theory, then if we are bombing each other on the surface, then we probably are affecting the underground as well. So
yeah, I never really thought of it that way, but that is another thing. Because I know, a little off topic, but the whole thing with Antarctica, of how pretty much you and I can't go to Antarctica if we wanted to. Like, you have to be specific people can go there. I don't understand what's going on with Antarctica to where it's been so secretive over the years. Like, you're not allowed to really fly over it. They do some stuff like, what's going on down there? I've read a lot of theories about, there's an entrance to like the hollow earth. No, there's actually alien stuff going on down there. There's like bases for aliens that we're working with, and all sorts of crazy theories out there that no one really can prove one way or the other. But I've always thought there's something strange with Antarctica.
yeah, I've heard a lot about that, and I think there's definitely something going on. There's that whole thing with Operation High Jump where they went to explore Antarctica. I think it was meant to be like a 6-month mission, and it only lasted 6 weeks. And they aborted the mission, and then after that they created the Antarctic Treaty, where I think it's pretty much every country in the world has agreed you're not meant to go to the center of Antarctica without special permission from every country in the world, and you're not allowed to fly over there.
Yeah, I think it was Admiral Byrd that flew over it, and everyone thinks he saw like an entrance to the hollow earth or something like that, because he said there was just lands beyond lands. So, and I know I've got an episode about where they think the earth is actually flat, like the flat earth theory. They think there's lands beyond Antarctica and that the earth isn't a spinning ball and everything else. Like, I've always kind of wrote that stuff off, but when you start going down that rabbit hole, some of their stuff makes sense too. So it's there's just so many theories out there that I always try and pick and choose how far I want to go down, because I don't want to get consumed by certain topics. I like to try and stay involved with lots of different things, but I feel like some of these people, they get on one specific kick of a topic and then they just keep going and going and going, and I try not to do that. But I do definitely believe that there's something strange going on with Antarctica, either aliens, hollow earth, I don't know, but it's just weird that every country agreed that we're not going there and no one's allowed to go there.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's something that governments don't want us to know about Antarctica. I mean, they try and claim that it's to do with safety and all that, but I can't. There's nowhere else on this planet that we say that you're just not allowed to go. So I believe there's merit to that. What it is, we don't know. I mean, the Admiral Byrd, his diaries seem to suggest that there is another world there, either an entrance to another world, or there's just an area in Antarctica that's doesn't appear to be like Antarctica. It's supposed to be sunny and have fields and stuff like that. So yeah, it's hard to know what to think, but yeah, I think there's something going on there, and like I was saying about the whole hollow Earth theory, if that's the case, there's an entrance to an inner Earth or another world within Earth, then it would make sense why other races, either from this planet or another, are concerned with what we're doing to the planet.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to wrap this one up today. I definitely enjoyed talking with you. I definitely appreciate you coming out here and talking with me. Your story is definitely one of those that it does fit with others that I've read about. Like, and again, I believe it. I think there's something a lot more to it than just dreaming. But again, who am I? I'm just a nobody podcast guy.
No, it's been really interesting, and it's fascinating to hear that you've heard lots of similar stories, and yeah, I 100% agree. There's more to it than dreaming. Maybe one day we'll find out some answers.
Hopefully, that's kind of why I do this show. Is I like to get these stories out because maybe someone else experienced something similar and they want to share it with other people, and then it just the more and more people are willing to talk about it, it might put more pressure on those to be more open about what's really going on, or we can discuss it and come to our own conclusions, and maybe, who knows, uncover some stuff.
I hope so. Just thanks a lot for having me on. Really enjoyed this conversation.
I definitely enjoyed it too. You have a good night, and I went ahead and I sent you the link to that interview, so if you want to check that out. But again, I appreciate it, so thank you.
Absolutely, we'll check that out. Cheers, Brandon.
Have a good night.
Cheers, you too, mate. Bye.
Good night. And that's our show, everyone. Again, I'd like to thank Luke for coming out today and talking with me. His experiences is definitely similar to some of the others that I've heard about, read about. It's one of those topics that I find very interesting, and I fully believe that there's a lot more going on than what we know. Again, if you've ever had an encounter or a story you'd like to share, please get a hold of me. You can reach me at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. Just look up Tinfoil Tales. Good night, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this one.